What is a juggalo? All right, welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Jakey, the Juggalo edition. What timing? 10 years ago last week was my first ever trip to the gathering of the Juggalos, so I'm going to get all into why I became a Juggalo, what got me obsessed with them, my first trip to the gathering of the Juggalos where I rented a bus and christened it the Juggalo Express and sold tickets to random Juggalos from around the country and the world who flew in to come on the ride with us to Cave in Rock, Illinois, which was it was like something like 24-hour drive from Manhattan. And of course, I'm gonna get to getting beaten up and almost killed at the gathering, which I'm laughing about because I mean oftentimes you laugh about I laugh about I deal with tragedy and trauma with humor, um, but I mean it was funny, retroactively funny. It wasn't funny in the moment at all, but I made the most of it and I made the best of it and I bounced back and I'm prettier than ever. So I'm gonna get into it. It's also incredible timing because I woke up this morning to my phone blowing up with texts from people telling me that Insane Clown Posse is retiring from the road and they're going to do a farewell tour. And it turns out Violent J, who is the heftier one of the two, there's Violent J and Shaggy Two Dope. Violent J is big and beefy and meaty, and Shaggy Two Dope is more thin and wiry and rangy, I guess is a word you might use just to describe him. And Violent J has heart issues and has gotten all sorts of procedures done, but he still has an irregular heartbeat. So they announced today that they're going to do one big farewell tour next year. And they're going to do America, Canada, Australia, Europe, and then retire from the road, kind of. People just read headlines nowadays, right? So I don't think most of the people who even sent me the story had read this story. They did say they're going to keep appearing at the Gathering of the Juggalos. They're going to keep appearing at Hallowicked, which is a big event they do on Halloween every year in Detroit, and they're going to perform once a month somewhere. But it's the end of their long touring cycles, which I guess, everybody gets older, so it's probably for the best. If that's what Violent J needs to do to keep his health and maybe keep his sanity, then God bless him for it. You know what I mean? That band, I don't know how many shows they've played, but it's got to be a fuck ton because they were on tour basically for 20 plus years. I think their first big major label album came out, I believe it was the summer of 97. Would it have been the summer of 97? Summer of 98? I forget. It was the Great Malenko. What year was I on the Warped Tour? I feel like I was on their summer of 97. And their album came out the same night, I believe, as Kid Rock's debut album. And Kid Rock was on the Warped Tour, and I saw him every night. And that's when I fell in love with him. Man, I'm in love with Detroit. The city, somewhat. I have a little D tattoo. But just I haven't spent a lot of time in Detroit, but I spent a lot of time listening to music that came from Detroit. And I've argued a lot of times that Detroit is the spiritual home of rock and roll because a lot of bands came out of LA and New York and obviously Nashville when you look at the country spectrum. But what city produced more fine rock and roll than Detroit? Like homegrown talents from Detroit. You're talking about, obviously, Motown, everybody from Motown. You're talking about Bob Seger, you're talking about Ted Nugent, you're talking about Iggy and the Stooges, you're talking about the MC5, you're talking about Jack White, you're talking about Eminem. People who came out of LA and New York moved there to make it, but Detroit fostered all of these awesome acts from inside of Detroit, right? Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels, right? Who else? Michael Jackson lived in Detroit for a long time, although he's from Gary, Indiana, the blackest city in America. Who else? I don't know. I'm not looking it up. I wasn't even prepared to talk about this, but Jay Giles Band recorded their live albums in Detroit. Peter Wolf was a DJ on Detroit radio. Kiss had Detroit Rock City. They adopted that as their second hometown. Alice Cooper was from Phoenix, Arizona, but the band moved to and created a lot of their best music while living in Detroit, oddly enough, and adopted that as their hometown. So yeah, I guess Detroit even had that people who moved to Detroit to make it. The Von Bondies were from Detroit. Nobody remembers them, but if you Google what is Jason Stolmeister, apparently he talked trash about Jack White one night, calling him a sellout and a punk and all this stuff. And Jack White found him in a bar and beat the fuck out of him. And if you Google Jason Stolmeister's face or whatever, it's great. Black eyes, which I guess ties back into this story because there's a great picture of me after getting beaten up at the gathering of the Juggalos. Multiple pictures, and my face was swollen like a hot air balloon, which is apropos because many people have accused me, rightly so, over the years of being full of hot air. Hence this podcast. You can't have a podcast of your own unless you're full of hot air. But yeah, it was 10 years to the week last week that my first gathering of the Juggalos that I attended it. But I'm going to get into the whole Juggalo thing, but first I'm going to talk about my motorcycle adventures from this weekend and last week. And if you've been following along with this podcast, you already know all this, but if you're new to the podcast, when the pandemic started, I moved to a bumfuck town in Idaho called McCall, which is 106 miles north of Boise. Then once you get out of the city of Boise, you kind of like make a right on Route 55 at the Home Depot, and you pass a couple traffic lights within your first couple of miles of getting out of Boise. And to get to my house, you drive about 106 miles, and then you make a right on what road, I'm not going to tell you, but you make a right, and you go about 10 miles up into a mountain, and you can make that whole fucking drive without as much as a stop sign. Not a traffic light, forget about it. Not even a fucking stop sign till you get to my house, which is fucking rad. But at a certain point, I decided that this town that is named McCall, that I've nicknamed McCalm, this town was too big for me. You know, I left Manhattan looking for a change, and I wanted something different, and I found something different in McCalm, and then I was like, you know what, I'm going to go further out there. So I rode my motorcycle up to this town called Yellow Pine, which is about a 3-hour drive, which I can manage to do in 2 on my motorcycle. But if you're in a car or a pickup truck or something, it'd take you 3 hours to drive a 52-mile dirt road over a mountain pass. The road is called Lick Creek Road, and you go up over Lick Creek Summit, and it's one of the most beautiful fucking drives I've ever done in my whole life. It's just such a picturesque piece of America that like nobody knows about, which is great. I don't know how it's not on one of the best dirt roads of America, or what I did this past weekend. So I've been riding that multiple times a week to get to work. I rode up to this town called Yellow Pine, and I went for a day, and I did a round trip in one day, and I ate at the Yellow Pine Tavern, and then I sat on the couch, and Yellow Pine Tavern is like an old Western saloon. In this town, you ride this 52-mile road, you don't pass anything. You don't pass a stop sign, a stop light, you don't pass a light, you don't pass an electricity cable, you don't pass anything. You're just on a dirt road over a mountain pass forever. And then you pull up, and there's this tiny Yellow Pine. It's 1 mile by 1 mile in the middle of an old national forest. It used to be a mining town. The mine has since closed. If you're interested, you can look up Stibnite Mine. That's Stibnite. Put it in Google. And CBS Saturday morning TV show last week, they actually had a whole segment on the Stibnite Mine and the altruistic mine company that's trying to reopen it right now, called Perpetua Resources. They were called Midas, as in Midas Gold, but they're not trying to mine gold anymore. And I think they changed their name just to try to get people to forget about all the shit they've done and all the environmental disasters they've created up there. And the whole story is like they have the CEO of Perpetua Resources. What a fucking name too. Like, yeah, we want to own all of the resources in this mine in perpetuity, that's a clause that's in a lot of record contracts. If you listen to my episode, How the Music Business Really Works, you'll learn a little about that. Record contracts will oftentimes have in the language that the rights retain with the record label in perpetuity for the territory of the universe. And record labels started putting that in their contracts in the 90s. It used to say the world, and then they changed it to the universe. So, like, in case they discover that people are listening to music on fucking Mars or some solar system galaxy we don't even know exists yet, that they're going to still retain the rights to that. That's how good corporations are, and the Perpetua Resources CEO, which was this plastic surgery lady was just talking about, like, oh, we're going to do all the best things for the environment when we're done mining these fucking minerals out of there. And the idea is that there's these mineral deposits up there that are going to be worth tens or hundreds of billions of dollars that are going to be used to make rechargeable batteries, and they're going to be more efficient than lithium. And obviously everything's making the change to electric. So they want to get in there and fucking pull those resources out of the earth. And then there's interviews with the Native American tribe who's like, yeah, we don't fucking believe these people. And I know what side I'm going to lean to in believing it, even though I've only done 7 minutes of research by watching that little YouTube clip. But so I go up to this town of Yellow Pine, 23 full-time residents that swells to about 100 in the summertime. And there's a tavern up there, and I spent the day at the tavern, and then I went back the next week, and I decided to camp for 3 days, and I left my phone at home, which was very nerve-wracking to just not even have my phone with me. But what do you need your phone for if you're in the middle of the woods camping? It's not going to do you any good, even if you need to contact someone if you don't have any service. So really, it's just like a mineral in a mine that hasn't been exposed yet. It's just a hunk of shit that has no purpose unless it's connected to something else. But I left it at home, and I went back to the tavern 3 days in a row to eat. And at the end of the third day, I said to the woman, Lorin, who's the owner, I was like, do you need help? Because she was overwhelmed and busy. And I was like, do you need help? And she was like, do you know how to bartend? And I was like, of course I do. Never bartended in my life. Then she said, do you know how to cook? And I was like, yeah, of course I do. And she was like, cool. You want to start next week? And I started the following Thursday. And I'm now the bartender, cook, waiter, busboy, dishwasher, DJ, and bouncer at the Yellow Pine Tavern. So I've been riding up there a fuck ton, and I've been doing it on bald tires. Because I bought a set of tires last summer, and then put about 11,000 miles on them last summer, just riding around the western part of the United States. And they were getting pretty thin. And I was riding this fucking rocky, sandy, treacherous dirt road at least twice a week, sometimes 4 times a week. I would ride there and back, and sometimes there and back twice in a week. And eventually I was like, I need new tires. And I probably would have put them off longer if it wasn't for my wonderful friend Aaron Lazar, shout out, who kept texting me, you better please go get those new fucking tires. Aaron designed the awesome Harmonica Fest, Yellow Pine Harmonica Fest Suck and Blow t-shirt, which is available now in our store. And he also designed the world famous Yellow Pine Tavern shirt. He's also the singer for a fantastic band called the Giraffes, and principal songwriter and singer for his band called Don't. And also just a fucking wonderful human being who I love so much and have been connecting with a lot lately, and I'm very happy for that. But he kept saying, get the tires, get the tires, get the tires. And motorcycle tires are expensive. But I finally plunked down the money, and I got a new set of tires, and they were $391 plus installation. Came out to $541 total. And I went up to GPS Power Sports, Gosselaar Power Sports in Grangeville, Idaho, which is a fantastic motorcycle shop. If you live in the Idaho area, and if you're listening to this, I'm guessing not many of you do. Shout out to Holly. But if you need tires or anything done for any of your motorsports vehicles, please go to Gosselaar Power Sports. But I had stopped there in February when I stopped there to say hi to him, because the guy I bought this motorcycle from, when he found out I was in Idaho, said, hey, if you're ever going up through Grangeville, stop in Gosselaar Power Sports and say hi to my friend Mike up there. So I was headed up there one day to go to Lewiston, Idaho, to go to, actually I was going to Clarkston, Washington, which is across the river from Lewiston, Idaho, but Clarkston, Washington is just a small little river that separates them, and Clarkston has the Walmart. And I went up there to go to Walmart to buy some painting supplies and really just to like take my used car for a spin. And I stopped in, said hi to him, we chatted for a while, and then I pulled next door to fill my tank with gas, and I turned the key and something went poof. And I heard like a little mini explosion, and smoke came out from under the hood, and I managed to start the car and drive it back over across the parking lot to his shop. And he tried to help me fix it, but it was beyond his capabilities because you needed this belt, and I ended up stranded in Grangeville for 5 days, and I went there every day and just hung out with him. And then Keith texted me and said, you should Google this guy, he's the real deal. So I did. And it turned out he was the head mechanic for Ricky Carmichael for years. Ricky Carmichael is the GOAT, the greatest of all time of motocross racers. He was like 8-time national supercross champion, motocross champion. Just literally the greatest guy to ever get on a bike and ride it in the dirt. Winningest rider in AMA history for all their different race classes. Just the shit. And I was like, holy fuck. And then when I went over to his shop the next day, I Googled him that first night and went over the next day just to hang out. I spent 5 days basically hanging out with him and going through the thrift stores of Grangeville. And I went into the back room of his shop, the side room, I guess you'd call it. And there's all these trophies and pictures of him and Ricky Carmichael. And I was like, holy shit. And I was like, well, this is obviously the only place I'm ever going to take my motorcycle. And funny aside, too, he's the brother of Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell, Mark Paul Gosselaar. Gosselaar, I don't know how you say it. But in one of the interviews I read with him, it said that his brother was a famous actor who played Zach Morris on Saved by the Bell. And I just kind of stuck that out in my memory. And I did talk about this on an early episode of the podcast about meeting Mike and being stranded in Grangeville for 5 days. But I didn't ever mention that his brother was Zach Morris because it just didn't have anything to do with the story, really, until now. Because I stopped in there a couple times when I'm passing through Grangeville, when I was going up to the Demolition Derby, and subsequent trips just to go up to the two closest places to do any shopping to me are down in Boise, 106 miles one direction, or 172 miles the other direction up to Lewiston and Clarkston. And literally, it's the only place to do any shopping unless you're talking about hardware stores, dollar stores, or thrift stores. There's literally nothing else in between those two places from where I live. That's how remote where I live now is, in McCall. And so stopped up there a couple more times, and then spring came, and I was like, oh, I should go get my oil changed. Why I didn't get new tires then, I don't know. But I just kept looking at them, and I'm like, there seems to be more rubber left. So, like, I want to get every dollar out of these tires. And like, why I didn't get new tires, I don't know. Because I'm fucking broke. That's why. That's exactly why. So I really needed to get every dollar out of these tires. I didn't just want to. So I went up there and got my oil changed. And then a couple of weeks ago, I called him and I was like, dude, I need tires. And I was like, let's order some tires. So it took a couple of weeks to get the tires in because there's all sorts of supply chain issues. And he was actually out on a ride, and fucking cut to, he invited me to go on this ride. He was like, well, a bunch of us are going on this big ride, and I passed on it because it was Harmonica Fest weekend at the tavern, and I really needed to be there to work, and thank goodness I did because I earned more than enough money to pay for my new tires. But the ride I passed up on, Ricky Carmichael was one of the riders, and then he told me afterwards that they do it every year. So next summer, I'm going to do this fucking ride, and I'm going to ride with Ricky Carmichael, and that's just going to be amazing. That's like if you got to play a game of basketball with Michael Jordan or play golf with Tiger Woods, that's what going on a fucking ride, a dirt adventure ride with Ricky Carmichael is like. So I went up there last week to get my new tires put on, and I got there, and Mike was like, oh, hey, cool, I got your tires. Yeah, I'll put them on. I actually got to make a run to the DMV. We just watched the shop for me for a minute. He's like, I got to get a new plate for this 4x4, whatever, one of his machines. And I was like, yeah, sure. And then fucking 5 minutes later, in walks this dude who just screamed Hollywood, but I didn't recognize him. But he walked in and he was like, hey, where's my brother? And I was like, holy fuck. It's Zach Morris. And I was like, oh, he's at the DMV. And then we just started chatting. And he's like, who are you? And I'm like, I'm Jake. He's putting new tires on my bike. He's like, okay. Then he's like, all right, well, I'll come back in like a half an hour. I'm going to go get something to eat. Can you recommend a place around here to eat? And I'm like, yeah, the Rib Guy barbecue place right down the street. It's really good. And he was like, okay, cool. See you later. And I was like, bye. And then I still was like pretty sure it was him, but Zach Morris had blonde hair, this guy had brown, and obviously it's a long time later, so I had to Google him, and I was like, yep, that was fucking him. That was how fucking weird. And then Mike came back from the shop and was like, hey, I was like, oh, your brother came by. He's like, oh, yeah, cool. And I was like, oh, what's your brother doing in town? And he was like, oh, he just, came up to visit, go on the ride, bring the kids. And I was like, oh, cool, okay, weird. So, yeah, I ran into Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell at the motorcycle shop in Grangeville, Idaho, which is like population 1,000, maybe 2,000 or something. It's even smaller than McCall. And my friend Phoebe was like, only you gonna run into Zach Morris in a tiny fucking town in the middle of nowhere, Idaho. And like, what are the chances? Because what if I had come for the tires a week later or the next day or whatever? Like, just, you know, I love when things like that happen. It's just, and when Phoebe said only you, I was like, you're right, only me. And I did sneak a couple of pictures of him. I didn't like ask for a picture with him. I thought that would have been a little weird since he was just visiting a tiny town in Idaho to see his brother, and I'm friends with his brother, and I didn't want to be like, can I get my picture, dude? I kind of regret it now. Would have been a cool picture to have, but whatever. I'll run into him again another time, I'm sure. And so Mike's changing my tires, and he's got this other mechanic there named Mike. Mike McQuillan, whose daughter recently got bit by a rattlesnake, which he told me while I was up there. And he told me after I'd been at the shop for like an hour and a half, just he's wrenching on another bike, and just out of the blue, he goes, Jake, I forgot to tell you, my daughter got bit by a rattlesnake. And I was like, why do you seem so happy about this? And he's like, because she's okay. And then he started showing me all these pictures of like the bite mark on her foot, and the what the nurses or doctors did was like, as the venom spreads, they put Sharpie lines on the body, and they mark down what time it is, so they see how far and how long it's taken the venom and the swelling to spread and everything. And he managed to get her. He lives in Whitebird, which is 17 miles south, and he lives high up on the side of a mountain. So I don't know how many miles away that is, because I don't know how high up the mountain he lives. But he said it was from bite to ER in 22 minutes, which guy must have been driving like a fucking maniac. And I joked with him later. I was like, Chad Reed wouldn't have been able to get there any faster, even on a bike that you expertly prepped for him, because Mike McQuillan, he was Chad Reed's mechanic for a lot of years. And Chad Reed was the guy who took over the number one position when Ricky Carmichael fucking stopped racing. And it's like, Jesus Christ, what are the chances that these two guys are fixing fucking motorcycles and quads and ATVs in a little shop in a tiny fucking town in Grangeville, Idaho? But that's why I say, if you need your motorcycle worked on, go there. But anyway, so Mike Gosselaar was, I'm going to call the other one Rattlesnake Mike, because he killed the rattlesnake, by the way. He killed the rattlesnake that bit his daughter and put it in the back of his pickup truck when he took his daughter in, and he wanted to bring it to the doctor so they could see exactly what bit his daughter. And now it's in his freezer. And his daughter, who's 9 years old, by the way, is planning on making a hat band out of it, which is the band that goes around the head part of a cowboy hat. What a badass little girl. She's going to have a fucking hat band of the rattlesnake that bit her, and an amazing story for the rest of her life. But anyway, Mike Gosselaar was like, finally went and like took the wheels off my bike. And I got to say, like, what a trip it is to get to hang out at a shop like that and just watch these mechanics work and ask them questions. And they're cool dudes, and I guess they think I'm a cool dude because they let me sit in and watch and ask questions. And I don't know anything about a motorcycle. Like, me and Mike were talking, and he was like, you should air your tires at 33 pounds per square inch. Like, on the road they should be 40, but on the dirt they should be 33. And he's like, a lot of guys like to run them lower than that, but if you hit a big bump or a tree stump or something, you could put a dent in your rim, and then you'll need to put a tube in. Do you have a tube? You should carry a tube in your case, just in case that ever happens, because then you can take the tire off, get a tube in, and inflate the tube, and it'll keep the tire around, and then that way you'll be able to keep riding, because if you dent your rim, then it's not round anymore. And I was just looking at him like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you don't carry a tube? And I was like, Mike, if I was broken down on the side of the road, even if I had a tube, the chances of me putting that tube inside the tire somehow are literally the same as me building an atomic fucking rocket on the side of the road. Literally the same amount of chance. Zero. That would never happen. And I have this theory about breaking down on a motorcycle. I have a tool set in case I need to fix like a mirror that breaks or falls off or something. God knows what else I would be able to fix on that bike. But I carry a little mini air compressor that I can stick into the like cigarette lighter type adapter, and I carry a little battery charger in case my battery dies, in case I leave my keys in it, like I've been known to do, because I'm a ding dong. Hence my riding club with Jorma, Vic, the Ding Dong Riding Club. That's our riding gang. There's only 2 members. But I carry little tools like that, but they're little things that I can fix. Like, okay, you could fix a flat tire with that, but first you got to know how to plug the tire. And I recently bought tire plugs, which also I don't know how to use. When I told Jorma about tire plugs, then I explained to him my whole theory of how to fix a motorcycle on the side of the road. And it should just wait for someone else to come by, because men love being men. And my theory is I haven't had to put it to use yet. Not on the road. I did on a motocross track when I crashed pretty bad and fucked up my handlebars. But like, men just love being men. And if a guy comes by in a fucking pickup truck or other guys come by on bikes and they see that I'm broken down, I'm just pretty sure that they're going to snap to and fix it for me, because men love to prove that they know how to do everything. That's like a big trait of a man, and they'll be like, get out of the way, let me help you. And I was telling someone that recently and at the tavern, and he told me, oh, one time I came through on my snowmobile through Yellow Pine, and I went into the general store and I asked if someone had a specific size Allen wrench because I needed to fix something. He's like, within minutes, all 25 people in this fucking town were surrounded my snowmobile and all offering help on how to fix it. And I'm just like, men just love proving that they know what the fuck they're doing, especially when it comes to things involving mechanics. So I just figure if I ever break down on a trail or whatever, I'll just wait. Someone eventually will come along and fix it. That's why I carry 4 cans of beans, a bag of almonds, plenty of water, life straw, and a tent and sleeping bag with me pretty much wherever I go. Because if my bike breaks down, I'm just going to wait and hope eventually someone comes through. And I did buy a little Garmin satellite connector thing called an InReach, which I bought it like 3 months ago and haven't taken it out of the box yet, but eventually I will. I better do that before I go on my big ride next week, which I'll get into. But Mike takes my wheel off, and he was like, oh my God. And I was like, how much life do you think? It was not a pleasant, oh my God, when he looked at the tire. And I was like, how much life do you think those things have left in them? He goes, you mean now or 3,000 miles ago? He was like, fuck, man. If I saw these 3,000 miles ago, I would have told you to get them changed immediately. And I was like, well, in all fairness, you did change my oil in April, which is probably 3,000 miles ago, and you didn't mention anything. And he's like, fuck you. And I was like, well, that's why I'm getting them changed now. But I was like, see, I did get every mile out of them. And so he took one tire off and put the other on, and then he did it to the front wheel, and then Rattlesnake Mike came over, because Big Mike Gosselaar was like, yo, check out this fucking tires. And he's like, I have no grip strength. And he's putting his thumb into the tire, and it's just completely folding. And they were like, we can't believe you didn't have a blowout just getting here. And then they were like, so you go from McCall to Yellow Pine every week? I'm like, yeah. They're like, you ride over Lick Creek Road every week, both ways. You've been doing that on these tires. I was like, yeah. And they were like, you're either incredibly skilled or incredibly stupid. And we know you're not stupid. And I was like, yeah, I was beaming with pride. I'm like, I'm incredibly skilled. I'm an incredibly skilled rider. And I feel like our relationship took a turn for the better at that moment. Because I think he realized, like, he knows that I don't know anything about motorcycles and just kind of shakes his head when I remind him of that fact. But I think that moment right there was when he was like, oh God, you really do know how to ride then. Because he was like, you should have been like just sliding all over the road and off a cliff. And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess I'm incredibly skilled. And then a little later, they went to look at my tires again after they had gotten both wheels put back on the bike. And they were like, look at these, look at the wear on these. They're like, you lean a lot, huh? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, ain't no chicken strips here. And chicken strips that's a term you give to a motorcycle guy, to his tires, when only the center of the tire is worn. Because when you lean over on the bike into a turn and you're carving the turns, the sides of the tires wear. So if the sides aren't worn and just the center is, they call that a chicken strip, meaning you're too chicken to lean into a turn. And they were marveling. They're like, well, you never see tires worn like this on a GS, like a big 1200cc bike. And it was more marveling, like, holy, wow, you really fucking ride this thing, huh? And I'm like, well, yeah, man, that's what it's meant for. And I was like, I may not know anything about how they work, but as far as when it comes to riding, like, I've had guys come in, you stop at a fucking, these like motorcycle bars on the side of the road when you're out in the middle of nowhere and there's 80 bikes parked on a Saturday afternoon, and inevitably someone comes up and wants to ask me about my bike. Oh, what year is this? Oh, is that liquid cooled, air cooled? I'm like, I don't fucking know. And I don't wear the clothes. I don't wear the right pants that they wear. Everyone wears these $2,000 suits, and everyone's got their bike like dolled up with the right accessories, and I don't have anything. I fucking goofy thing strapped to the back. I look like the guy from the Beverly Hillbillies. I got my fucking unicorn strapped on there. And they very quickly are like, we don't want anything to do with this guy. And I always just chuckle to myself, because I'm like, you want to ride with me? I'll outride any of you guys. Pretty much any of you dudes. You want to talk about mechanics? Like, I don't know anything about mechanics, but like, who fucking cares? But eventually I'm going to count on one of them to save my ass when I'm broken down somewhere. But, so then I got these new tires, and then on the ride home, with new motorcycle tires, you got to ride slowly for the first 100 miles. You can't really lean into turns, especially in the rain, because they're slick. There's a slick chemical coating on them that they use to release them from the mold when they make the tires. And any motorcycle tires you use, you got to ride very conservatively for the first 100 miles. of course, I was 100 miles away from home, and they're extra slick in the rain, and it was raining, and I'm doing these like mountain passes, but at least it's on pavement, and I rode home very carefully. And then when I got to Last Chance Lookout and Goose Creek Falls, which someone told me is an amazing hike, I saw the turnoff for that road that goes out to Goose Creek Falls, and I know it's a 3-mile dirt road, so I was like, fuck it, I'm going to get out in this dirt. And I did, and I blasted the 3 miles there, and then I blasted the 3 miles back, and I had so much more traction. It was mind-blowing. And on the way back, I was like, I'm going to find the breaking point of these tires, meaning like, where's the point where they actually skid out in the gravel? And to find that, I was doing like 50 around a corner in third gear, just fucking humming and buzzing the engine, and I like leaned it a little to the side and gassed it, and they slipped out a little, and I was like, that's something I would never do, like just if I'm out riding for fun. And it gave me a lot of confidence, because I was like, all right, these tires can grip basically anything unless I'm riding like a complete maniac. And I admit the only time I'll ever ride that fast is if I'm trying to outrun a forest fire or a bear, which I did see. I saw my first bear the other day. Yesterday, Jesus, time flies, or moves slowly because it feels like it was a long time ago. But I saw a bear yesterday on a trail. It scurried out from some bushes, and the trail was maybe like, I don't know, 12, 15 feet wide. And the bear came out about 100 yards ahead of me, stopped, looked, and then scurried across the trail into the other bushes. And then I got scared because I don't know. I thought it was a baby bear because it looked cute when it was like humping along the trail or whatever. But I just thought it was a baby bear. I couldn't tell how big it was because I had no frame of reference, but I just thought it was a baby bear because it looked cute the way it was walking. But I don't know, maybe it was an adult bear. But I was like, if that's a baby bear, mama bear's not going to be far behind. Fuck. So as I approached that spot, I downshifted in a second, hit the fucking gas, hit the throttle to make my engine loud, and then just started hitting my horn, going beep, 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 hoping to scare the bear away. Because in my head, I could see mama bear coming, like, launching out of the side of the bushes like Brian Bosworth or something, and fucking tackling me off my bike. But thankfully that didn't happen. I'm still alive. And so yeah, I did Lick Creek the next day, and then I had to go back over Lick Creek the day after that to get physical therapy on my knee, which is good. All praise to the Most High Allah on my knee, finally feeling better. I might actually start running again this week. The physical therapist and doctor said, like, yeah, you can run like a half a mile twice a week this week, and then a mile twice a week next week, and then a mile and a half. So I'm going to go for a hike after this up to the reservoir, and I'm excited. So my knee's in good shape, but I was riding Lick Creek back and forth and just like burning over the roads there. Not super fast, but super confident. Because now I know I have tires that are actually going to grip the dirt, which is great. And the best time I ever did Lick Creek Road when I was really going for it on my bald tires was 81 minutes. And then I went for it decently, and I did it in 75 minutes the other day. And I think that's, I don't need to do it any faster than that. I mean, I bet I could do it in 69 minutes, like under 70, but like there's no real need. I don't want to risk it, you know? I say that now, but wait, 2 weeks from now anyway. And then, so this week, I worked at the tavern Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I got off at 1 o'clock, and I was like, I'm going to do this crazy road now. So from the tavern, I'm already 52 miles off the last piece of pavement up a dirt road. And I had never gone further than Yellow Pine because I had heard from everyone saying the road gets even more rocky and treacherous the further you go past Yellow Pine. But I had read about, like, from Yellow Pine, you can go to Big Creek, and then you can go over Elk Summit, and then you eventually drop down into Warren, which is a town I visited before that has no electricity, and the only way to get into Warren is like a 55-mile snowmobile ride in the winter because they don't plow the roads that go in there, or you can land a plane in their airstrip there, which the airstrip, it's just a patch of open land. Not really much of an airstrip, no runway to speak of, as you land on dirt or land on snow in the winter, and I guess they plow it or something. But there's big signs outside the airstrip that say no snowmobiles on the airstrip. But I came down into Warren, and then from Warren you go through Bergdorf, a famous hot spring place, and then you drop down into Riggins, over these switchbacks that are called the Fingers because they look like 5 fingers splayed out on a map. Just these crazy, super long, wide switchbacks. And I ended up doing like 140 miles of dirt from Yellow Pine. So basically from when I started in McCall, it was 200 miles of dirt road without ever seeing a fucking lick of paved road. Not a lick of, other than in the restaurant in Warren, which Warren is they don't even have electricity run there, so everyone uses solar power and generators. They do have another version of the Yellow Pine Tavern, another Wild West Saloon, so I stopped there for lunch. Holy fuck. Like, the road past Yellow Pine, if I had tried to do that on my old tires, I would have made it like 10 or 15 miles and fucking turned around. Like, there's no way I would have attempted that on those old tires. And even on the new ones, it was fucking hairy. And it was all these like tight Jeep trail roads. And I did 120 miles yesterday of that kind of riding. Almost all of it, I never got out of second gear. I was in first and second gear, just like over just rocky passes, and they were scary rocky passes because there were lots of rocks in the trail that you had to navigate over, and you're constantly just looking for your line, like where you're going to put your wheels between these rocks that are cropping up out of the trail. And every time you hit one of these big rocks, it shifts the bike a couple inches one way or the other, so you got to find a good line that's to the inside of the trail, because on the outside of the trail it's almost always a cliff of some sort. Not a cliff like you're thinking of, like just flat sheer drop, but like we're talking like 80-degree slopes that just go down into a mess of trees. And like if I had gone off the side of one of those roads, like no one's gonna find me. No, like, because first of all, no one's really looking for me, which is why I got that Garmin thing. So I gotta fix that. I gotta make someone let me like Safe Buddy and have the Garmin report back to them. Yeah, I guess you can set it for like every so often to send someone a message, and then they know if you don't check in for an hour or something. If they don't get a message, then it's all satellite shit, so it's not cell phones. So they know if they don't get a message for a certain time, they can ping your last known location and send someone to come help you. And also, if you crash, you're supposed to wear it like on your chest or something. And if you crash, you can push a button that's just like an emergency danger button, and you sign up for, I don't know, it's like $10 a month or something, and that'll notify the Forest Service and the rescue people to come and get you. But I was never in danger on the ride. It was a very dangerous ride, but I was never in danger. For the most part, because I was paying a lot of attention. There were a few moments early on in the ride where I would just kind of like the scenery was so stunning, but you had to look at a lot of it through your peripheral vision, because every time I would like look down, look to the side, look to try to see something, I'd look back down on the road, and you know, if you drift 2 feet on a road like that's only 10 feet wide, like you could be in trouble very quickly. But I made it the whole way, never crashed. I did drop my bike at a lookout spot called Jacob's Ladder Flat. Yeah. And I saw the sign, so I stopped, and I put my kickstand down, and it didn't go down all the way, but it caught a rock, and I got off the bike, and the bike just shifted slightly and fell into me, and it knocked me over, and I fell into the road. I got a great picture where one glove is like 8 feet away from the bike, because I had just taken my gloves off to get my phone out, and the bike fell on top of me. And I had my brain was going a mile a minute, just for like a couple brief seconds while the bike was on top of me and I was on the ground, and I was like, oh my God, am I hurt? Is anyone going to come around? Am I going to be able to get this bike up off me? And like that whole trip, I only saw 4 other vehicles. I saw a Forest Service truck. I saw a pickup truck. I saw a quad, like an ATV thing, and then a side-by-side, which is like those dune buggies made for the forest. And it might have been a while before someone came along, or it might not have, but it's a popular route called the Backcountry Discovery Route. That road is, but I don't know how I never saw passed another motorcyclist coming in at me. I do know, because motorcyclists like to ride first thing in the morning and get off the road before it gets too warm. I don't believe in that, though. I believe in riding first thing in the morning if you can. I couldn't because I was working at the tavern, but then ride first thing in the morning till sundown. Like, get all the fucking riding in you can. So I don't understand how I never passed anybody coming the other direction. I understand how I didn't. Yeah, I should have probably passed people coming up from behind them. Well, those are the vehicles I did pass. But I probably wasn't going to pass a lot of motorcycles on that road, only because I wasn't riding fast. I was in first and second gear, because I was more like, I got to survive this road. I'll go do it again now that I know what to expect. But like, when you don't know what to expect on a road like that, every time I would come around a corner, I would think to myself, like, all right, here's where it's got to like flatten out and get straight and easy riding. And it did not, all the way to Warren. And then from Warren to Bergdorf, and like 12 miles past that, which is like 29 miles, then it was like pretty flat and straight gravel roads with not a lot of rocks sticking out of them. But 12 miles past Bergdorf, there was a sign right outside of Bergdorf. I say Bergdorf like it's a town. There's just a hot spring there. But right outside of the hot spring, there was a sign that said, road not suitable for passenger cars after 12 miles. So I was like, okay, well, this is going to get good after 12 more miles. And oddly enough, I was missing that challenging, tricky riding. And then shit got tricky. It was fucking, I had been up at like 6,600 feet elevation. Earlier in the day, I had passed over an 8,800 foot peak called Elk Summit, which is just fucking, just breathtaking, stunning shit, you know? And then down in Bergdorf, it was like 6,600 feet. Or between Wern and Bergdorf, I passed Steamboat Summit, 6,600 feet. Then down into Bergdorf was like 6,200. And then Riggins is like 1,400. So those switchbacks that are called the fingers, they just take you down fucking steep, like 2-mile long switchbacks. A lot of times switchbacks are just, you know, like Z curves kind of, that are only like, you know, a tenth of a mile long, and then you turn and turn. But these were like miles long to get you down the side of this mountain. It was fucking wacky. I'd never seen anything like it ever before. And now I understand why people are like, have you ridden the fingers? It's fucking great and it's beautiful. And then I got down to the bottom of that, and then it was a 20-mile run along the Salmon River and these fucking white sand beaches by these serene eddies in the river that are just like, I gotta go back there. I gotta camp. I was thinking about doing my podcast from there today. Eventually I'll do one of them from there. It's so fucking gorgeous and beautiful. What riding. And I went back to get new brake pads on my bike because last week when I was getting my tires changed, Mike was like, you're gonna need new brake pads. And I was like, how much mileage do I have left on those? And he was like, I wouldn't wait till the next tire change, but you probably got 1,000 or 2,000 miles, no problem. And I was like, I'll be back next week, order the brake pads. Like, I want to put them on. And I kind of took it for granted because I know this guy that he was just gonna fix my bike for me when I wanted him to. And he did it for the oil change. Like, as soon as I rolled up for the oil change, he was just like, stopped what he was doing and changed my oil. And then same with the tires. And then today, same with the brakes. But when I got there to do the brakes, I was like, yo, how's it going? He's like, oh, it's nuts, man, nuts. I got there at like 10 a.m. this morning. And he was like, it's nuts. I just 3 more appointments just booked today. And I was like, well, that's great, right? He's like, no, it's not great. I don't want any more work. I'm booked out 3 months in advance as it is. And I was like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, man, it's 3 months in advance if you want to get an appointment here. And I was like, yeah, but you're fixing my bike right away. And he's like, well, because you're you. And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. That's so fucking cool. Like, not only these guys let me watch and ask questions, but they'll just fix my bike like the moment I show up. I don't have to, even like corporate motorcycle shops are always like, oh, yeah, we'll fix that for you. Bring it in next Thursday. And it's like, I don't need it fixed next Thursday. It's my motorcycle. That's what I ride every day. And I think most people don't ride their motorcycles every day. So I think for most people, they're like, oh, I need this fixed. I'm going to just call the shop and schedule an appointment, and I'll just drive my car until then. But, like, I don't know. Why do you have a motorcycle if you're not riding it? I know why you have a car if you're not driving it every day, because, like, you just have to have a car to move things around in or whatever, especially if you have kids or whatever. But, like, a motorcycle, if you have a motorcycle and you don't ride it frequently, like, somebody should take it away from you. Like, they should have motorcycle protective services for people who don't ride their bikes, and they should be given to people who want to ride and can't afford it. Kind of like child protective services will take a kid and give it away to someone who wants a kid but can't conceive one, or just needs the money, like a foster family that has 12 foster kids. But that's not who they should give them to, you know? But yeah, they should. I'm going to establish the motorcycle protective services. Anyway, that's enough about my motorcycle riding, except to say next week on my birthday, which is August 30th, next week, that's right, send birthday cards to P.O. Box 4116, McCall, Idaho, 83638. Or send them care of the Yellow Pine Tavern. Whatever you do, if you're going to send something, send mail to me at the Yellow Pine Tavern, which is probably where I'm going to spend most of this fall until hunting season ends on November 2nd. Hunting season actually begins on my birthday this year, and every year, it turns out, I learned from talking to terrible Tom Lanham, the guy who runs the hunting company up there. Hunting season starts on August 30th. Bow hunting season for elk. If you want to send me something to the Yellow Pine Tavern, you can do that. It's 330 Yellow Pine Avenue, Yellow Pine, Idaho. Whatever you do, don't put my fucking last name. Nobody up there knows my last name. I like it that way. Someone asked me the other day, and my stock reply is, why do you want to know that? What are you, a fucking cop? And they're always like, just curious what your last name is. I was like, it's the bartender. So if you're going to send me anything, write Jake the bartender on it. That's how I would prefer to be addressed in that town, because I love my anonymity and I love being known for just the guy I am up there with no extra baggage of the character I've created. That's Jake Roxoff or Jake Sufnerowski, which is really me, as you know, if you listen to this podcast, but like, they don't need to know my past. people don't go to towns like that to embrace their past. You know, a few knuckleheads do want to just shoot off at the mouth about who they are and where they've been and what they've done. But, like, everyone just chill, man. Just chill. A bunch of outlaws up there, a bunch of life dodgers. And I'm not dodging life because I'm working like a motherfucker, but that's fucking hard. It's not hard work up there. It's long work for not a lot of money. There were a few weeks where I made some really good money, and then this fucking past week, I made $30 on Thursday, $76 on Friday. I made $200 on Saturday, and then 40 more bucks on Sunday. It's like, it's hard living, you know what I mean? But I'm hoping that things are going to ramp up for Labor Day, and I'm going to make a fortune, and we're going to sell a bunch of t-shirts, because apparently Labor Day is a big weekend up there. The 3 big weekends up there are 4th of July, which was my first weekend, Harmonica Fest weekend, which was fucking bananas, and then Labor Day weekend, and then apparently after that it really falls off and dies down. But I'm hoping I have enough shekels socked away to make it through the winter up there. But then, you know, if you want to put some shekels in those birthday cards and send them to me, P.O. Box 4116, McCall, Idaho, or 330 Yellow Pine Avenue. You got to put Yellow Pine Tavern on there. Just put Jake the bartender. Don't put my last name. Don't even put my last name if you send it to the post office. Who wants to spell my last name? Just put Jake Roxoff. But don't put Jake Roxoff if you send it to the Yellow Pine Tavern. Just Jake the bartender. Am I making enough sense here? Anyway, enough about that. Next week, though, on my birthday, I'm going to work through Saturday night and work a little Sunday morning. Then I'm going to take off, and I'm going to end up doing this thing called the Magruder Corridor, which is a 120-mile dirt road that connects Idaho to Montana. It goes from Elk City, Idaho to Darby, Montana, and it's some old road that they built in the early 1900s and people have been murdered on and all this great shit. And I'll tell you all about that next week when I do the ride up there. If I don't die, which I probably won't because I'm a skilled fucking rider and they know I'm not stupid. But if anything, I hope to record my podcast there next Monday on my birthday, somewhere at some scenic lookout point up there. I'm going to bring my rig, and I'm going to try to figure out how to set up the laptop without a stand, and I'm going to record from a scenic spot. And when I get down into Darby Tuesday morning, that's when I'll post it. So next week's podcast will be late, but I was thinking today on the ride from Grangeville back to McCall, I kind of had this laugh out loud moment. I had so many laugh out loud moments yesterday, and so many moments where I literally was just like out loud to nobody, just going, Jesus Christ, like just because the terrain was so hard. And every time I'd like round another corner and see more difficult terrain up ahead and twisty roads going up steep curves, all the sandy washes, and I'd just be like, Jesus fucking Christ. But you know what? At a moment in yesterday's ride, this moment, it just completely occurred to me. So I was getting a little frustrated, but also in a funny way, and I was laughing to myself. And any time I get in those dangerous situations on my bike, call back to earlier in the podcast, I kind of like cackle out loud. And like if I have a near miss and I get too close to the edge and almost slip off, I just start laughing. And it's just a natural response to danger and fear and trauma. Yeah, that happened a bunch, but more frequently I was like, just like, Jesus fucking Christ, like how long can this tricky of a ride go on for? And but at a certain point I was climbing up. It's probably like 15 miles outside of Warren, Idaho, headed towards Warren, and it was just this steep, twisty, sandy patch. And at a certain point I got to the top and I took a picture. I like just put the bike in neutral and didn't even get off the bike, just took off my gloves, took my phone out, took a picture. Then I just started thinking to myself, like, I am so fucking lucky. Like, this is a road that if you've ever ridden a motorcycle through the dirt, this is like the Ricky Carmichael of those roads. It was stunningly fucking beautiful, technical, tough terrain. I've been thinking about taking people on motorcycle trips and adventures around Idaho. I'm going to launch that next year, Rocks Off Adventures. And for most of that ride, you could not take anyone who's not a very experienced rider on this road. Like I would, if you called me and said, yeah, I've got a motorcycle, I've ridden 2,000 miles on my Harley, I'd be interested in doing some dirt roads with you, you're never going to see that road. If you tell me, oh, I've done this and that, and I had this kind of bike, and I've done a lot of dirt road riding, I've done 10,000 miles of dirt road riding, I'd be like, all right, I think I can take you on this road, but I'm going to need to ride with you first. Like, this is a road that is like, this would be a once-in-a-lifetime experience for a lot of people. And in fact, it is. A lot of people come up to Yellow Pine and to Idaho to do the backcountry discovery route, which is a route that'll get you from the southern part of Idaho all the way up through up to the Canadian border without ever hitting any pavement or very little pavement. Sometimes you have to hit pavement to get to gas stations, but it's all dirt road riding, and it's all some of the most beautiful riding the country has to offer. And I'll take people on some stretches of the BDR, the Backcountry Discovery Route, but I will not take anyone on that stretch I did yesterday. Apparently the Magruder is a much easier road to navigate, but it's just long and also majestically beautiful. So I can't wait to check that out. And Jesus, if you tuned into this episode just to hear about my experience with Juggalos, well, now's the time where we're going to get to it. So, Insane Clown Posse. I was aware of them since the 90s, and I was into them, and I actually got a chance to book them at Wetlands, and their rep at William Morris at the time called me up and was like, let's do a show with Insane Clown Posse, and he actually sent me some videos from, like, local news reports, and I was like, this is not selling me. Like the Juggalos and their rider was like, you got to, like, put all the speakers, wrap them in plastic bags and duct tape, and all the lights have to be covered with clear plastic because they spray Faygo root beer everywhere. And they're like, oh, but we use diet root beer, so there's no sugar in it, so it won't leave any lasting effects on your electronic equipment, but you don't want to get it wet. And I'm like, that doesn't sound interesting to me. That sounds like something I would love to go see at someone else's club, but I don't have that in my club. That just sounds nuts. So I was aware of them. I bought the Great Malenko literally the day it came out at the Virgin Megastore, and I dug it, but I fell in and out of love with them. And then they were skewered for years in pop culture, and just Juggalos were made out to be dangerous, violent, thuggy, stupid. They are a lot of those things. But they were made out to be this pariah of society. And I fell victim to that just like a lot of people did. Oh, Juggalos, whatever. Yeah, the fans who like painting their face and the clown rappers, whatever. And I had a friend, Kevin Gill, who was the voice of Juggalo Championship Wrestling for a lot of years, so I knew they were deep into wrestling, and they had been the WCW Tag Team Champions for a little bit, and they have their own independent wrestling organization, which obviously I respect. But I got this call one day from someone at Live Nation who was like, the Insane Clown Posse is going to play the Great Bamboozle Festival, which was happening out in New Jersey, and they're like, the night before the Bamboozle, they're going to play the Gramercy Theater. The show's sold out. They're looking for a place to do a after party, and it's got to be they want a 600 cap space that's all ages. And I was like, that's next week. That's next Friday. And they wanted to start at midnight because it had to be after their show at the Gramercy. And I'm like, that place doesn't exist. There isn't a 600 cap all ages venue that's going to let us do a show at midnight. And if there was, it would already be booked. And they were like, come on, man. They asked us. We don't know. That's why we're calling you. We know if anyone in New York can make this show happen on short notice, you can't. And it wasn't a show. It was an event. So Insane Clown Posse wasn't going to be playing, so I didn't have to worry about the sound equipment and the Faygo and all that. So then it dawned on me oh, it's April. Our boats aren't really busy. Our boats are kept at 23rd and FDR, just 4 blocks down the street from the Gramercy Theater. So I was like, hey, we could do a boat party. And I pitched that to them. And I could do that as all ages. We don't typically, but because it was April, I was able to talk the owner into it. And so I booked it. And the person from Live Nation called back, and they were like, they love it. They think the idea of doing it on a boat is fucking great. What do we need to do to make this happen? And I was like, well, it's a $5,000 rental. And it's a $5,000 security deposit. And they were like, you won't need a security deposit. I was like, well, I do, because I've never worked with this group before, and their fans have a bad reputation, and I want a $5,000 security deposit. And if they fucking FedEx me a cashier's check for $10,000, then we'll put the tickets on sale. And they did. And the next day, a fucking check for 10 grand showed up, and I put it in the bank, and we put the tickets on sale, and it sold out immediately. And then that next Friday night, I went to the Gramercy Theater to see the show. And at that point, my hair was multicolored. It was like a Neapolitan ice cream bar or something. It was it was pink, purple, yellow, and brown layers. And I remember I went there and I was wearing pink pants, and I had this hoodie that I had bought in Hong Kong that was all these cuts of raw meat printed all over. It was one of those all over hoodies. This is 2011. And multicolored glasses on because I hadn't gotten LASIK surgery yet. And I remember I walked down there with my friend Cody, who worked for Live Nation, and she had set this thing up with me. And we walked down to the Gramercy, and everyone was waiting in line. at like 5 p.m. because they wanted to get in. So we're walking up and down the line, and I'm looking at them, and I turn to Cody, and I'm like, look at all these people. They look ridiculous. And she's like, Jake, they're looking at you thinking you look ridiculous. And I was like, too fucking shay. You know what I mean? You're absolutely right. You're 100% right. I forgot. I hadn't looked in a mirror that morning or whatever, but I was like, I look more ridiculous than any of these people. So, like, who the fuck am I to be judging them? And as soon as she said that to me and I realized that, I was like, yeah, we're all just fucking misfits. Okay, cool. Like, all right, I like this already. And then the show happened, and fuck, who opened? Who was the opener? No Redeeming Social Value opened, and they're just an over-the-top hardcore band. They were fucking great. The crowd was loving them. The crowd doesn't often love Juggalo, non-Juggalo acts, but they're just fucking all sorts of bananas with a crazy stage show. So that went over well. I mean, well for Juggalo culture, because usually their opening acts, much like Slayer's opening acts, get booed off the stage. But watched them, and my friend Drew came with me, and then Insane Clown Posse came on, and it was fucking amazing. It was just, I don't know how to explain it. It was fucking magic. Like, they came out, they hit the stage, they had all these, like, evil clown, roadie kind of guys, but that were just, like, hype men, entertainers. They had fucking, like, oil barrel, like, 55-gallon drums filled with Faygo all over the stage, and they just kept taking the caps off these 2-liter Faygos and shaking them up and putting their thumb over it and spraying Faygo everywhere. They had all these Faygo moves. They could, like, put one upside down on their thumb and shake it and then launch it throughout the crowd. People were getting hit in the balcony. I got hit in the nuts at one point. Like, because I'm like, you're trying to, like, dodge the Faygo, but flying Faygo bottles, and you're just fucking completely soaked. Everything smells like root beer. I found out they use diet root beer because it doesn't have the sugar or the corn syrup in it. So it ends up drying like water. They just, whatever chemicals they use to sweeten that shit doesn't end up sticky. And they use root beer because it's the most aromatic flavor of Faygo. So the whole fucking place smelled like root beer. People were crowd surfing, moshing. The songs were way better than I expected them to be. I was just fucking pumped. And then when the show finally ended, I was like, all right. I was like, Drew, we got to go down to the boat now. And he was like, word. So we start marching down 23rd Street. And that's when it finally dawned on me that, like, oh my God, I got 400 Juggalos showing up on our boat, the Jewel, at midnight on a Friday night. And then it dawned on me, too, that I forgot. I didn't mention to the owner what kind of event we were having, because he never comes to these things anyway. But I was like, oh, my God. Oh, my God. What have I done? All right. Is $5,000 enough of a security deposit? All right. I'm probably going to have to give the owner of the boat the other $5,000, the whole $5,000 I got for the rental, because this isn't going to end well. This isn't going to end well. And everyone's like marching down the street, screaming whoop 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 whoop, and you know, just all these different Juggalo chants, family, and you know, down with the clown till I'm dead in the ground, and just screaming all sorts of shit and nonsense. We get down there, and who's at the fucking front gate of the marina but the owner, Marco. And he was like, yo, what kind of show is this you got? Who you bringing me tonight? And I was like, Insane Clown Posse. He's like, I know. I'm so psyched. And I was like, what? And he's like, I heard these guys on Howard Stern, and they talked about doing the show on the boat. And then I looked at your website and realized it was in my boat. And he's like, I can't wait. And so they all started pouring in, and he was in heaven. He was like, this is fucking great. And I'm like, well, now I'm like, great, because if anything goes wrong, I'm not on the hook for it, right? Like, I'm going to tell Marco, hey, you were stoked to have this show. What do you mean? Why would I think anything would go wrong? I heard him on Howard Stern just like you did, you know? Meanwhile, I hadn't drank any beer yet to this point in the night, or whiskey or anything, because I wanted to make sure I had my wits about me if anything were to go wrong on the cruise. And I had brought a change of clothes and brought them to coat check. So me and Drew took off our wet clothes, and we put them in the trash bags that we had brought, or clean dry clothes in, and I had my rocks off hoodie, and I get on the boat, and it's a fucking great party. And I had set up the boat earlier in the day to have this like big VIP section for them on one of the decks on the boat. And as soon as the band showed up with their manager, Billy, they were like, yo, what's this? And I'm like, that's your private area. They're like, there's no private areas here. This is a party for us and for the Juggalos. I was like, you don't want a private area to get away from your fans? They're like, if we wanted to get away, why would we want to get away from our fans? We wouldn't be having an after party like this where we want to get away from them. The whole point of this is to commune with them. And I was like, oh, yeah, cool. And I was like, okay, well, here's some drink tickets. They're like, cool, we don't drink much. Like, we won't need that many of them and whatever. And I went and got a drink, and they were just taking pictures with their fans and hanging out and talking to everybody. And and I think it was DJ Clay was DJing that night. It was one of their DJs, and it just turned into be the best fucking time, one of the best nights of my life. And people kept coming up to me, just random juggalos, and being like, hey, you're from Rocks Off? Because I had my Rocks Off hoodie, and I'm like, yeah. And they were like, over and over, I had almost the same conversation with all of them, and they were just going, thank you for having this party. Thank you for like allowing us to do this. Most venues don't want the band there. They don't want juggalos there. They think we're bad people. And people just kept like wanting to give me hugs, and I was hugging all these juggalos. And then I had talked to ICP about wrestling for a while, and I knew Terry Funk was one of their favorite wrestlers, and I heard you guys love Terry Funk, and they were like, yeah, and I was like, told them the story about how I went to a meet and greet with Terry Funk once. I paid $100 to get him to autograph something, and then when it was time to get the autograph, he was like, all right, what do you want me to sign? And I'm like, I want you to sign my arm. And he was like, what? And I was like, sign my arm. I'm going to get it tattooed tomorrow. So I went, got it tattooed the next day. Terry Funk is famous for being a barbed wire wrestler. I mean, it's just one of the millions of things he's famous for in the wrestling world. But he got involved in all these crazy barbed wire death matches in the late 90s in Japan against Cactus Jack and Sabu. Cactus Jack, you might know as Mankind, Mick Foley, Dude Love. Yeah, Cactus Jack was his hardcore character. Him and Terry Funk had a lot of brutal barbed wire matches in Japan. They had the exploding ring barbed wire death matches where bombs would go off in parts of the ring during the match. They would count down to when the bomb would go off, and one wrestler would try to put the other where the bomb was going to go off. Like really insane shit that you only get away with in Japan. I went to a fucking exploding ring fucking death match once from Combat Zone Wrestling down in, Voorhees, New Jersey at the Philadelphia Flyers practice skate rink. And the explosions, they weren't like the ones you see in Japan. They weren't even explosions. I don't know what they were. They were like baby powder shots or something and make a lot of smoke. It was terrible. But Terry Funk was really in real exploding ring barbed wire death matches, like crazy shit. So when I got his tattoo, I had a little piece of barbed wire with a drop of blood coming off of it at the end of his signature, and I showed it to the ICP guys. They were like, that's the fucking coolest thing ever. Oh my God, yeah. And there's a story in Terry Funk's book where he wrote about ICP, and they had, one of the ways they became famous in the 90s, or infamous and underground, was they took all these Japanese death matches and they dubbed their own commentary over it. What'd they call it? They called it Bloody Mania, and they were making up the names for the wrestlers, and it was hilarious. And they were doing their own commentary, and Terry Funk once, they were traveling, ICP was traveling through Amarillo, Texas, where Terry Funk lives, on the Double Cross Ranch, and that's the name of his ranch, swear to God. And they went to visit him at the Double Cross Ranch, and they wrote about it in their book, and they said, hey, Terry, when we want to give you some money, or he wrote about it in his book, they said, you know, for years we were selling bootleg copies of Bloody Mania and Stranglemania. Was it Stranglemania? I think it was Stranglemania was what it was called. And I think Bloody Mania is something else. And maybe that's one of the ICP shows they do now. Anyway, the thing was called Stranglemania. I think it's readily available on YouTube. But they wanted to apologize to him for like bootlegging a bunch of his matches and selling it back in the day. And he was like, oh, don't worry about it, boys. It don't matter to me. And apparently, like, they were like, no, take the money. And he wouldn't take the money. And then their tour bus left, and Terry said he got a text from them after the tour bus left, and they said, like, look under your coffee maker. And they had left like $10,000 in cash under the coffee maker. They were like, that's for a Stranglemania. And he was like, I still ain't never heard a lick of their music, but they're my favorite band, which I always loved. So yeah, they loved my Terry Funk tattoo, and I loved meeting all the Juggalos, and there was no incidences. Everyone was cool. Now, I don't even think anyone passed out, which is remarkable considering the cruise it was midnight doors, and then we cruised from 1 to 4 a.m., and people were just in great spirits the whole time and fucking having a ball, and it was an amazing fucking night. And I went home and I woke up the next morning, and I got a little drunk that night because I was having drinks with people. I woke up the next morning at my apartment at 250 East Houston Street, apartment 4F, with a nice balcony overlooking Houston Street. And I woke up and I just started reading articles about Insane Clown Posse. And the more I read, the more entrenched in their kind of culture I became. And then that afternoon, I was binge watching interviews and reading. Probably spent 4 or 5 hours just laying in my bed reading about Insane Clown Posse and listening to music and watching videos. And then I went over to Inborn Inc. on Ludlow Street, just south of Delancey, and Tasha Rubino, one of my favorite tattoo artists in the whole world. I said, I need a Hatchet Man tattoo. And she was like, word, where are we putting it? And we put it right next to my Terry Funk tattoo. And I was like, fuck it, whoop, whoop. down with the clown till I'm dead in the ground. Family, man, you know, I was in for a penny, in for a pound, as they say. I was like, that's the day I became a Juggalo. And then I was like, I need to go to the gathering of the Juggalos. So what I did was, we were doing these bus trips at the time, which will probably resume next year, where we charter big, like, Greyhound coach bus type of things. Not actually Greyhound, but these big 55-seat coach buses with bathroom and stereo system and stuff. And we bring in some cool lights, and we encourage people to bring coolers, and we transport people to concerts around the New York metropolitan area and give them round-trip service. And I called my bus company, and I was like, yo, how much to charter a bus to leave Manhattan and arrive in Cave in Rock, Illinois, the day of the gathering, and then turn around and come back 5 days later, because it was a 5-day festival. And they were like, that's going to be an insane amount of money. And I was like, why? And they're like, we're going to need to send a bus driver. Like, a bus driver can only drive 10 hours at once. So, like, we're going to need, they had to, like, was it 10 hours or 12 hours they're allowed to do, or they need a certain amount of rest. So, yeah, what they did is, like, somewhere in Ohio, we picked up another driver that they had sent out. So, like, this driver drove his own car all the way out to Ohio. So Kangaroo, one of our drivers, drives the bus to Ohio. We pull into some motel, and the other driver gets on, takes over for Kangaroo. Kangaroo's, like, gets in one of the seats and starts sleeping. And then the bus went all the way to Cave in Rock, Illinois. And then I had to pay to put these drivers up in a motel for 5 days. And then I had to pay some kind of salary to them. I think it was $100 a day each for 5 days, just for them to be sitting on their asses. So they were getting paid because they couldn't run any bus trips. I tried to convince the bus company. I'm like, why don't you try to charter your bus for the 5 days we're not on it? And they're like, we don't charter buses out of fucking Cave in Rock, Illinois, you know? So they ended up, they got us there, and they came back with a quote, and it was like $13,000 to make this happen. And at that point, I divided that by 55 seats, so it was, you know, I don't even remember how much it was now. It was $300. I think we were charging $300 round trip, $279, something like that. And I had basically had it set up so the only way I would even break even was to sell basically all the seats on this bus. But I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna rep for my fam, Juggalo fam, who can't make the drive all that way for whatever reason. And big mistake, because I didn't understand the culture well enough. And I don't know, we had like, 18, 20 people pay to get on the bus or whatever. So I lost a fucking fortune. And any rational businessman would have just canceled this. And had I canceled it and then just flown to the gathering and rented a car or an RV, it would have cost me a lot less money than actually running it. But I was like, nah, man, people made their fucking plans to go to the gathering based on being able to have this ride, and they gave me their money, and they spent the money for their tickets to this bus, and I told them I was going to do it, so I'm going to fucking do it. I don't care how much money I lose. And we did. And I was trying to get different friends to come with me, and, you know, I had this one coming. Sean Dunn was coming. We had Shane from Rocksoft was coming. We had my friend Bill H, who was doing social media for us at the time. He was coming. Drew was coming. Christine was coming. Our friend Lucas was coming. All sorts of people were coming. And then one by one, they all dropped out. They all bailed. So who we ended up having, it was like me and Shane and Bill H were the only ones who went. And I think I gave Bill a free ride. He flew from Austin to New York. He lived in Austin. But I didn't charge him to come on it because he was doing social media trying to get people to come. And everyone thought it was a great idea, but people were like, that's just too expensive. But I was like, well, you know, people have broken down cars and hoopties, and is their car going to make it to Cave in Rock, Illinois? Why not be able to party the whole way there? And there was a lot of talk about how, like, police would pull people over on the way into the gathering, but we figured, like, maybe people would understand that police are less likely to pull over a coach bus, so it would be a good way for them to smuggle their drugs in. I never posted that on social media, but I did some wink winks and private messages. I'm like, hey, man, you know, bring whatever you want, you know. There are tons of drugs on our bus, by the way, fucking tons, which we'll get to in a minute. But we didn't get pulled over, which was great. And so we ended up doing this bus ride, and dude, it was fucking bedlam. I mean, it was in the best way. It was kind of one of the stupidest things we've ever done. Also one of the best. I can't believe that we all didn't end up in prison, especially Kangaroo. Especially, was it Fasta that robbed the convenience store? Maybe. Hey, look, there's a car going by. It's my landlady. What's up, Shanti? Yeah, I forget who did what exactly, but So there was a Band of Horses show happening at the Hammerstein Ballroom, and that was always the meeting spot for our buses. So we got this bus pulled up in front of the Hammerstein Ballroom, and then the Band of Horses are playing inside. Their crowd and Juggalos are very different, and all these Juggalos start showing up, and there was some parents who brought their 16-year-old kid, Juggalo kid, and were like, hey, we bought the ticket for our son to come on your bus because we want him to go to the gathering, and we drove him here from Worcester, Massachusetts. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, your son's not 18? They were like, no, but we trust you. Like, you don't even know me, lady. You're going to put your son on a bus with us? And she was like, yeah. I was like, all right, fuck it, And it was Andrew Stott. Came from England. I can't remember if he brought another English buddy. Jesus, we had people coming from all over to come on this bus ride, and we left. And the first night, everyone was stoked. We left at 9 p.m., so we're driving overnight. And then, somewhere in Pennsylvania, we stopped at one of those rest stops that's just like a highway rest area. Not like a gas and sip big fuel place, but just where there's a couple of vending machines and a bathroom. And then next thing I know, people were graffitiing all over the walls of the fucking outside of the rest stop. And of course, everyone had started drinking. I was like, guys, what are you doing? This is vandalism. You can't do that. And I'm trying to be the, good scout leader, troop leader, but I'm kind of drunk. And so then I put a dolphin unicorn sticker on one of the bathroom doors. I was like, fuck it. That also not smart, because you don't want to put a sticker with the logo of your company next to vandalism. But everyone was tagging and writing whoop whoop, and I was like, oh god. So I'm like, stop one, vandalism. And then finally somewhere in western Pennsylvania, I was like, Kangaroo, we all need to stop at a convenience store. We're going to get some snacks and fucking hot dogs and whatever. And it's I don't know, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. God knows what time it is. It was late. It was very late. And we pull over. There's one of those convenience stores that's just off the highway. So you get off the exit. The convenience store gas station is right there. And then the on-ramp to get back on the highway is right there. And this is a very important thing to note. But we got off the highway. We made a right off the off-ramp, and then made a left across oncoming traffic to get in. So then to get out of there, you basically were going right from the parking lot onto the on-ramp to get back on the highway. And why that's important will become clear in just a minute. So we all get out, and by this time, we had opened a couple bottles of Jack, and people had started popping pills, so it was really getting wild. And we're just cranking music, and everybody's getting introduced to each other, and so many people are going to their first gathering, and people are starting to put their clown makeup on, even though it doesn't start till the next day. And so we pull into this convenience store, and Kangaroo just pulls the bus up in front of the convenience store, kind of between the store and the two sets of pumps. And he's like, all right, everybody, you got 10 minutes to go into the convenience store, get your shit, come back out. We need to keep a schedule. So I tell everyone this. Dude, I go into the convenience store. It's completely overrun. There's 20 Juggalos. There's nobody else there. There's this one person working there who just looks like, oh, God, my night just got terrible. And we're all in there fucking hooting and hollering and screaming. And all of a sudden, I see people just start stealing things. Just full on just taking shit and put it in their pockets. Not being slick about it in the least bit. Everybody just started robbing this convenience store. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. Guys, try to keep it cool. And then people are going up and paying for a Mountain Dew, but their pockets are just bulging with fucking candy and chips, and people are reaching in their pocket to get their money, and you're hearing chips crackling, and the poor dude behind the counter is like, oh. And I'm like, when's he hitting the alarm button? So I finally get everyone out, and then as I get everyone out, I realized there's 2 more people inside, and I was like, oh, well, I'm doing the head count, and I'm like, Kangaroo, hang on, I got 2 more people inside, and I go to get off the bus to get them, and as I'm going to get them, I see Bill has taken one of the fucking gas pumps off the handle, and was fucking squeezing the handle and held a lighter up to it, and thankfully there wasn't any, he didn't put his credit card in, so he wasn't shooting actual gas out, but he was burning whatever residue of gas is left in the handle is burning, and it's got a sizable flame, and he's waving it all over the place. And I'm like, Bill, what the fuck are you doing? And I run over and grab him, and I pull him into the bus. And as I'm pulling him into the bus, the last 2 guys come out, literally just arms full of as much as they could carry, like a fucking movie. They come running out the doors with not even put shit in their pockets, and candy bars are falling out of their big arm. It looked like that supermarket sweep or whatever. and these guys come running out. So I get them onto the bus, and I'm like, Kangaroo, hit the gas before we all get arrested. I'm sure the guy's calling the police. You see the guy inside on the phone through the window of the store. I'm like, Kangaroo, get the fuck out of here. Kangaroo fucking peels out with the bus, basically does a U-turn through the parking lot, and then just like rolls over a patch of grass to get on the on-ramp of the highway. And eventually we're on the interstate, and I don't know if the kid called the police, and like we wouldn't be that hard to find, but I guess like we're a black coach bus. I don't know that he got the plates. And for the next hour, I was just like, we're gonna get pulled over. And then Bill H ends up passing out. Most everybody passes out, and then finally the next morning, like we all wake up and we're somewhere in fucking Indiana or Illinois. I don't know. Yeah, Indiana. And we end up stopping at a Walmart so we can all go get supplies, because that was a scheduled stop. We're like, we're going to stop at the Walmart closest to Cave and Rock. So, like, if anyone needs a tent, you need to get cases of beer, food for the weekend, whatever. So we stop at the Walmart, and everybody goes inside. And one of the dudes had puked on the bus, so I made him buy cleaning supplies so we could clean it all up. And everyone starts waking up, and it's like 8 a.m. at the Walmart, and Bill H wakes up, and I was like, what a night. And he's like, yeah, what a night. And I was like, dude, I can't believe we haven't even gotten to the gathering yet. Already, there have been incidents of vandalism, robbery, and fucking arson. And Bill goes, arson? What was the arson? I was like, what do you mean, what was the arson? When you lit the fucking gas pump on fire and you sprayed it around like a goddamn fucking trauma film guy. And he was like, wait, I did that? And I was like, you don't remember fucking doing that? I had to grab you and drag you back onto the bus. And he was like, knew I shouldn't have mixed Xanax with that bottle of Jack. He had no recollection of doing that. And I was just like, at that point, like, what are you going to do? You just laugh, right? Laugh to keep from crying. But there was really nothing to cry about because we're all alive. And so, yeah, with the bus ended up, finally we got to Cave in Rock, Illinois, and we had to put the bus on a ferry boat to get it across the ferry, which is whatever river that would be that, I don't know, connects Kentucky to fucking Illinois or whatever down there. And is it Kentucky, Tennessee? I don't know. But we end up, you got to put the bus on a ferry that we waited forever for, and we finally get to the front of the gathering, and they fucking let the bus in, and they're like, they brought our bus to this like campground kind of spot that they had reserved for us, and they had like people like flagging the bus through the whole festival site, and like I swear Kangaroo almost ran over 10 people because nobody was paying attention, even though they had someone being like, everybody clear the way for the bus. And people are like running alongside the bus because they think we're Insane Clown Posse because who else is getting this treatment? And they finally let us all off. And then Kangaroo's like, yo, I'll be back in 5 days. We're like, okay, dude. We'll see you then. Kangaroo is a character, was our bus driver for a long time until he tipped a bus over. And then he got fired by the company. But I caught him. We took a bus to Lil Wayne and Rick Ross once, and we had a bunch of paying customers on that. And I came back early from that one because I usually, when we would take people to a concert on one of our buses, I would always come back. I would leave the show like during the first song of the encore because I wanted to make sure that people were getting on the right bus and make sure the bus was prepped and ready to go and that Kangaroo wasn't asleep. And one time I came back and I was banging on the bus door, and Kangaroo finally came up from the back, and he was like zipping his pants up, and then one of our customers came up, and she had been sucking his dick in the back of the bus during the show, and I was like, Kangaroo, you little rascal, you. Fucking love that guy. I'm gonna see if I can text him, just say hi, what's up. I haven't heard from him like 7 or 8 years. I hope he's still alive. Chances are he's not. Dude drank a lot of big sodas and smoked a lot of menthol cigarettes and didn't have many teeth left, but he was a character, man. I love him. So, yeah, I remember when he got fired, I called him after he got fired, and he's like, the bus didn't totally fall over. He was trying to change a tire, and he didn't do the jack right. And so after he had gotten the wheel off, like, we're talking, it was like on the side of the fucking New Jersey Turnpike. He'd taken a wheel off, and then the jack collapsed, and so the whole thing fell down on his front right wheel where there was no tire. People were losing their minds. It wasn't one of our buses, bus trips, so I thought it was funny because it wasn't one of our buses. Funny aside to how we started doing these bus trips was, you remember there was a bad bus crash bringing people back from the Mohegan Sun, and the bus flipped over late at night and split in half on one of those dividers that was holding up a bridge. And I don't know, something like 15 people died. It was awful. But like the previous week, I had decided I wanted to start to do bus trips. So I called my friend Mike Johnson, Pro Wrestling Insider, pwinsider.com, one of the best journalists in the wrestling business. And I was like, hey, man, you do those bus trips to wrestling matches? Like, I want to start doing some bus trips. Can I have the number of your bus company? How much do you pay and all that? And I remember I had called them and we were playing phone tag, and then that terrible crash happened that killed all those people because the driver had fallen asleep. And he wasn't driving illegally or anything, but he had fallen asleep. And, yeah, it was obviously a terrible incident, but what am I going to do to fix that? Nothing. So I called the lady the next week. Her name was Rose. She ended up passing away too. What a tragic story this is becoming. And I called Rose and I was like, hey, we want to do these bus trips. Like, what's the price to get here, to get there? You know, how much for Jones Beach, how much for PNC, round trips, blah, blah, this kind of bus. And we negotiated our fee. And then I was like, okay, so you're telling me it's going to be $1,200 a bus or whatever it was. And I was like, I'll pay you $900. She was like, what? And I was like, I think $900 is fair. And she's like, oh, our rate's $1,200. And I was like, I know that's what you charge Mike Johnson. I've charged people in the past, but I'm going to guarantee you 18 buses this season, and I want to pay $900. And she was like, that's not how it works. You don't haggle. Like, this is our price. And I was like, yeah, well, I did see that thing on the news, and your driver just killed 15 people, and I don't think a lot of people are going to be calling your bus company this week because your name of the bus was on the fucking side of the bus, the name of your company, and it's in every picture, every fucking newspaper. A couple of weeks later, they changed the name of the bus company, smartly, but I did get my discount. And that's the bus company we took out there. But then the gathering happened, and it was fucking great, and we had a fucking blast, and it was an awesome time, and nothing really went wrong over the weekend. I mean, we all took tons of drugs. Me and Shane brought drugs specifically to sell on Drug Bridge, which was at the Cave in Rock, Illinois site. There was this bridge that connected like where the festival grounds were to the camping area. And there were almost no lights anywhere, definitely not in the camping area. But for some reason, this little bridge that was like a pedestrian bridge that went over a creek that went through the site had these big floodlights on it, and they called it Drug Bridge. And every year, like from all the stories I read, like Drug Bridge was the place where you go buy drugs. It was just kind of the designated spot for drug sales. And it was, I'd never seen anything like it in my life. I've been to Christiana in Europe, been to some crazy places in South Africa, been to obviously ghettos to buy drugs, plenty of ghettos in America, and never had I seen anything like it. It was just like full on people like holding up signs. I got Xanax, I got Valium, I got acid, like literally anything you wanted, signs with prices, guys arguing with each other who's got the better acid. And me and Shane, we each sold a Vicodin just to say we had sold drugs on Drug Bridge. And I think we each sold them for $1. I was like, $1 Vicodin, boom. Sold a Vicodin, Shane sold a Vicodin, boom. We were in. We're like, we sold drugs on Drug Bridge. We bought a bunch of drugs on Drug Bridge, even though we had plenty of our own, just for the fun of it and trying different things. And like, we're just fucked up all weekend. It was great. Porta potties were a mess. It was like 105 degrees. Bill H., if I remember right, had brought whatever that drug is, that not Metamucil, whatever whatever the drug is that's made to back you up. Because he was like, I brought this drug that I'm going to take that'll keep me from shitting for 5 days so I won't need to use the porta potties. I thought that was a brilliant move. We brought a fuck ton of beer, whiskey, tequila. God, it was just like a fucking cartoon. Like, we just stayed fucked up all weekend. We saw, I remember George Clinton that year, Insane Clown Posse, obviously, Dark Lotus, Twisted, all the Psychopathic Records guys, but my highlights were, I think, Bobby Brown, Vanilla Ice, Little White was fucking incredible. Like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, every song was about drugs, and we were like taking the drugs he was rapping about, like in the middle of a song, not thinking like it's not gonna kick in for another 20 minutes, and just all sorts of fucking calamity ensued. And then I was like, I gotta go back next year. And meanwhile, after that, then they played that fall at the Hammerstein Ballroom, and we went to that, and like me and my friends just started going to a lot of Insane Clown Posse shows, and it was fucking amazing. And I fell in love with the band, I fell in love with the fans, like the whole thing about being there, we're just wandering around talking to people, and like everyone's offering you hits of their weed and offering you free drugs, and like, do you want a beer, and asking where you're from, and like, as much as I've been around the jam band scenes and the punk rock scenes over the years, never have I found a scene that was as inclusive as the Juggalos, where nobody mattered what your name was, what you looked like, how you were dressed. It was just like, if you're cool, you're cool. And everyone was just like, the whole idea of it being family was sacrosanct, paramount. It was just like, you're part of the Juggalo family, like you're here, you're one of our friends. That's it. I don't care if you're a doctor or if you're a probation officer. If you're a probation officer, you probably, yeah, I think probation officer would be fine too. Everyone was just, a lot of criminals there, I'm sure, but everybody was just vibing and having a good time. And that's when I really became a Juggalo. That's when I realized, like, all right, these are my people in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, they're not. But, like, I don't know, I think it would be weird if one group of people was my actual people or identified with everything about them, right? Like, punks are my people, hip-hop crews are my people, hippies are my people, indie rockers, I don't know, maybe not so much. But, like, metalheads are my people, and Juggalos are my people now. Probably more so Juggalos than any of the other ones, though, in some weird way. I don't know. I haven't been to an Insane Clown Posse show in quite some time. Last one, I guess, was 2019, spring of 2019 I went. So it wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that long after that I stopped going to concerts because of going to the nut house and COVID and all that. What's up, Cosmo? Cosmo, come here. My little black cat friend Cosmo showed up. Oh, he's purring. What's up, Cosmo? You heard I was talking about Juggalos, right? And they're like the black cats of music culture. Here, no, you're gonna get down. We're gonna, Cosmo, come here. Can Cosmo jump off? Oh yeah, he's got it, no problem. All right, Cosmo. Anyway, so then the next year, I was like, I'm going back, but this time I'm not going to try to rent a bus. This time I'm just going to rent an RV, and I'm going to get some friends to go, and split the cost, and it still didn't work out that well. Everyone ended up bailing on that one too, and I realized that, like, all right, I'm kind of alone in my whole friend group. I'm alone in the whole Juggalo culture thing. So, but I went to, someone chopping wood in the background, by the way, in case you hear that noise, because we're mountain people, you know what I mean? You got to chop wood if you want to have heat all winter. So I'm going to read now the story about year 2. And this is my second gathering of the Juggalos. So I wrote this up. I never really wrote that first story up. I guess I'll get around to it eventually. But I'm going to read this one. I haven't read this story in a long time, so I'm sure I touched on some of these things. But here it is, this is like the book on tape segment. For those who have been following my Insane Clown adventures, or even just reading this blog, you'll know that I went all in, balls deep, down into the rabbit hole of Juggalo culture the day I got my first taste. I didn't go online and buy a t-shirt. I marched right down to Tasha at Inborn Inc. and got a Hatchet Man tattoo and dropped $13,000 to charter a bus for 6 days to shuttle a bunch of literal maniacs to Cave in Rock, Illinois for the gathering of the Juggalos. And yes, I absolutely count myself as one of those maniacs. You want to get an idea of where Cave in Rock, Illinois is? Get out a map of nowhere, unfold that motherfucker, and stick a pin deep in the heart of the middle of it, and you'll have an idea. That trip was chronicled somewhat in a previous post. G is for Gathering of the Juggalos. Something I forgot to mention in that post, though, is that the trip ended up losing me about $5,000 because I grossly miscalculated how many Juggalos would pay for that service. Most, quote, promoters I know would have cut bait and canceled the trip. Not me. I went and had a great fucking time, and after it was all said and done, and realizing that it might just be a flawed business model, for the 2012 gathering, I rented an RV to take me and just a select group of maniacs this time around. As much fun as I had camping for 5 nights the last time, I wasn't about to do that again. I've never understood sleeping in a tent. I've worked way too fucking hard to be able to afford a halfway decent shithole in New York City to then go out in the woods and pretend to be homeless. How funny that is now. I basically live in the woods 4 days a week. I set about trying to recruit some assholes to help split the cost of this thing with me, and of course I had less luck than a parolee violating a restraining order. Sure, everybody said they were down. Sean Dunn, my homie who shot and directed the phenomenal American Juggalo at the 2011 gathering, said he was in and bought a plane ticket to Nashville where we were going to go to get the RV. About 2 weeks before we were set to go, we got a paying film gig too sweet to pass up and had to bail. That left me with Sugar Shane, who couldn't back out because he worked for me, so I told him the trip was compulsory. I didn't even count it as vacation time, so technically this dude had an all-expense-paid trip and salary to the madness. Not that he minded, of course, as at the 2011 gathering, he had the record for quickest profit turned on the drug bridge. Things were looking rosy for Sugar Shane. Drew Rabbit Club, a.k.a. 2 Drew, was my rock, though. No way he would let me down. A few weeks before the gathering, I went to meet Drew and our buddy Lucas for a margarita at Niagara. That turned into 11 margaritas, and Lucas, being shirtless, splayed over the hood of a car with its alarm going off. That whole episode's going to be written up on another day. Probably on S's for shit-faced. But that night, Lucas agreed to come with us, so we bought him a ticket. A couple of days later, he called asking how to cancel. Something about his girlfriend persuading him to come to his senses. But at least Drew was still in. Till he wasn't. The day before we were set to leave, Drew called me and said that he'd come down with a nasty tooth infection and wasn't going to be able to make it to the gathering. Said his face was mad swollen. I knew he wasn't lying because he had already found a sucker to take care of his hyperactive team of pit bulls. The morning we were going to leave, I went to pick up some last-minute supplies. I knew I needed a sweet outfit to wear all weekend, and inspired by a recent pic I had seen of Lemmy, I went to the Levi's store and bought a pair of jeans and a matching denim jacket. In this blog post, I have a picture of Lemmy. If you just Google Lemmy and cut-off jean shorts, you'll see what I mean. And I thought I was going to look pretty badass in cut-off jean shorts. It didn't actually. I didn't look as cool as Lemmy, but that would literally be impossible because he's the coolest guy in the history of the world. So with that mission accomplished, I went by Drew's house to pick up a t-shirt he had custom made. He said since he couldn't wear it, at least I should take it and rep it at the gathering. When I got there, he showed me the shirt. It was a black print on a white shirt. It said, whoop, whoop. If you know anything about Juggalos, is that we have a sort of rallying cry mating call. And it's whoop, whoop, with the second whoop being a little more drawn out and rising in pitch. It's spoken, said, slurred, shouted, screamed. Sort of like a new siren of the NYPD cop cars. Coincidence? I don't think so. Whoop, whoop. I laughed my ass off and told Drew what a fucking idiot he was for misspelling whoop, whoop. He left the H's out, so it was more like whoop, whoop. He wasn't amused at me pointing out what a shithead he was, so I decided not to push it. I told him I'd take the shirt with me and rep it in honor of him. I just couldn't bring myself to really fuck with him, because he was in serious pain. I mentioned his tooth infection, but didn't do it justice. The entire left side of his face was swollen as fuck. Once he explained that he needed to be on antibiotics because of said infection, and that would preclude him from drinking at the gathering, I of course let him off the hook. No booze equals no gathering as far as I was concerned. Hell, even the pharmaceuticals you can buy on Drug Bridge don't achieve the required effect without a little alcohol mixed in. We were down Drew, so now that it was 2 and 2. We'd picked up Jessica Cross, former longtime Rocks Off employee who happened to be in Nashville for some meetings that ended the morning we needed to pick up the RV, and a somewhat random Jersey juggalette named Patricia, who I had met at an ICP show at Hammerstein Ballroom, and quite frankly didn't know anything about her, other than she replied to my Facebook post asking who wanted to ride in our RV and split the cost with us. I knew from Facebook she worked as a stenographer for court proceedings, so figured she wasn't a felon. That was good enough for me. Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? We went and picked up the RV and got a little bit of crash course in how to operate this thing. I'm pretty sure none of us really paid attention to the instructions delivered to us by the guy from Deliverance, but no matter. I was full of that blind faith you have that nothing can go wrong when you simply fail to grasp the scope of exactly what can go wrong. We set off for the gathering, and after a 5-hour drive from Nashville and a nice long wait for the ferry to get us over the Fucky River from Kentucky to Illinois, we arrived at Hatchet Landings, a.k.a. Cave in Rock, Illinois. We quickly parked the RV and found our way to Drug Bridge. We weren't going to waste any time getting back into the swing of things, but we also weren't looking to get loaded. Just wanted to feel back at home amongst our people. With a bunch of provisions procured, we reconvened at the RV to start testing the waters, so to speak. Once our buzzes were buzzing, we head over to the main stage to see the Ghetto Boys. One thing people don't realize is that the gathering actually brings together a lot of real hip-hop groups. In fact, the Ghetto Boys are making their first appearance together in over 10 years. We were getting down to Scarface, Willie D, and Bushwick motherfucking Bill when a guy came by and offered to sell us some mushrooms that he just swore were amazing. Jessica did some negotiating, and before we knew it, we were all lip-deep in the caps of some funky-ass fungus. The mushrooms hit the three of us all at once, and as soon as they did, we realized we needed to get back to the RV, immediately. We got back there as quickly as we could and proceeded to trip the fuck out for a few hours. And when I say trip, I mean fucking trip. We were all pretty sure we were seeing aliens and UFOs out in the night sky, and we weren't at all worried. Au contraire, we were excited. We spent a few hours just laying on the grass and rolling around and talking about how comfortable it was. It wasn't until we went back into the RV and turned the lights on that we learned a very important lesson about the power of those mushrooms. We were all completely covered in dirt. I went back outside with a flashlight and found that luxurious grass that we had been rolling around in simply did not exist. Yep, the mushrooms were just that good. We had been rolling around in fucking dirt. We had the perfect buzz to go check out some wrestling. We put on our special outfits for the matches, or at least I did. Lemmy pants, a.k.a. Daisy Dukes, and Drew's whoop whoop shirt, and a bunch of silver stripper glitter. What could go wrong? Me and Sugar Shane and Jessica headed to the wrestling tent and posted up near the guardrail to take it all in. People were flipping and twisting and punching and selling. It was like wrestling at its best, until it wasn't. Last thing I remember, Sugar Shane and Jess were standing in front of me, and we were whoop-whooping it up, and the next thing I knew, I was staring straight up at the sky with the cave-in rock dirt seemingly the only thing that had my back. As I tried to wrap my now whole swollen head around what the fuck had just happened, I was peering into the faces of some strange yet friendly juggalos, informing me that I had just gotten knocked the fuck out. I had no idea what the fuck they were talking about, and then it hit me. I had just gotten knocked the fuck out. But from where? And by who? According to the group of lows, some fucking scumbag had run up on me from behind and smashed me in the side of the face and then run right away. My clock had been cleaned. Because Sugar Shane and Jess had been standing in front of me, they hadn't seen what happened and only turned around when they heard my body lose its fight with gravity and attack the Illinois soil. By then it was too late for anyone to do anything, as the cowardly perpetrator was already sprinting away to the safety of darkness. Without hesitation, the friendly juggalos picked me up and shepherded me away to the relative safety of a patch of actual grass but 100 yards from the wrestling tent. One of my guardian angels brought me a bottle of water while the others propped me up on a fluffy patch of earth to let me regain what little of my senses I could gather. I was stunned. Stunned at how something like this could happen at an event so ruled by family. But no matter, I was regaining my composure and happy to be resting on the grass and still able to enjoy the wrestling event from afar. I may have been an unknowing participant in Bloody Mania, but at least I was able to still be spectating. As I was laying back in the grass and finally starting to wrap my rapidly swelling head around what had just happened, I heard a bit of commotion. As my eyes trained on the blur coming towards me, I snapped to attention just as a body launched through the air at my prone figure and a fist came smashing down upon my face. With what little coherence I had left, I was able to ascertain that said fist was attached to the body of a man with murderous intent. Like it was in slow motion, I could see his whole body flying through the air like a fuck you projectile, and kept it in focus until with a resounding crash there was no focus left. Fuck. I was under attack. Again. This time the fucker had brought reinforcements, and as soon as the first guy hit me, I was a recipient of a barrage of blows from a battalion of bastards that were in the midst of a full-strength attack on my very being. I only recall bits and pieces of what happened next, as it was mostly me covering up and struggling for survival, but I can still see a few frames clear as day. I can see a brick coming smashing down against the left side of my face. I can see Sugar Shane perched up on a guy's back trying to put him in a sleeper hold. I can see Jess punching a guy from behind with little effectiveness. And I can clearly remember the distinct sound of cheap Kmart cotton ripping against my flesh and the fibers peeling away from each other as this piece of shit was screaming, "Take that fucking shirt off." Before I even had a grasp of what was happening, the fucking cowards were off again. This sprint to the spot in hell reserved for cheap shot artists. Unfortunately, it's a place that Sugar Shane and Jess couldn't follow them to. As all this was happening, my guardian angels from earlier had noticed the commotion and come back to help run these bastards off. When the dust settled, Jess went to a security guard and said, "Aren't you going to do anything?" To which he replied, "Man, it gets worse here every year." Shrugged and sulked away. Security my ass. My badly beaten ass. When relative calm was restored, I was once again surrounded by the friendly juggalos, and they picked me up and formed a circle around me and told me, "You are not okay. That was fucked up, and we're going to take you to the medical tent. We're going to form a circle around you so that those assholes try and come back to get you again. We will not let them get you." As badly beaten down as I was at that point, both mentally and physically, I remember a sense of relief washing over me that, yes, I was surrounded by family, and that now I was actually going to be okay, or so I hoped. When we arrived at the medical tent, I realized that we weren't at New York Presbyterian or even Bellevue. We were at an overwhelmed, understaffed, and undersupplied festival medical tent in some ass-backwards backwoods country just in the outskirts of Go Fuck Yourselfville. When I was finally seen by a medical professional, his exam consisted of him opening conversation by asking, "Man, what did you do to get beaten up this badly?" And he shined a flashlight in each eye and asked if I knew where I was. Of course I knew where I was. I'd traveled more than 24 hours to be here. I might have been a fucking retard for being here in Cave and Rock, but I wasn't stupid, I told him. Just after our conversation, I looked over and they were wheeling a guy who was having a seizure. Then a moment later, a helicopter landed by the medical tent. When I was asked what was happening, the dude told me, "This ninja's going into cardiac arrest, so we need to airlift him to the medical center." It suddenly dawned on me that I was the least of their problem. So I grabbed a bag of ice, and me and Sugar Shane and Jess made our way back to the RV. I spent the rest of the night chugging beers and holding an ice pack to my head while Shane and Jess went off to watch the Miss Juggalette contest.
I passed out long before they got back, but when I finally woke up, they told me they had at least checked to make sure I was still breathing before they went to sleep. Probably more than I would have remembered to do if the roles were reversed. That morning, which was Saturday, we discussed leaving, but I was adamant that we stay. I hadn't driven all that fucking way to Nazi and Insane Clown Posse, who were headlining that night. I also wasn't about to let these fuckers run me out of town. They might have ruined my face for the weekend, but they weren't going to ruin my whole trip. I went to work and I created some fun t-shirts. My favorite was the one that said, "Don't fuck with me" on the front, and on the back, "I already got beat up twice last night." We went out and made the rounds of the gathering. The worst part about wandering around that day was that I had no idea what these douche canoes even looked like, so every time someone was walking directly towards me, I wondered if I was about to get attacked again. That got old quick, so we returned to the RV and spent most of the day just hanging out with each other and trying to make a dent into the gallons and gallons of booze we had brought. I'm no doctor, but I bet in retrospect it's not a good idea to drink alcohol after a concussion. But boy, it sure did make me feel better. As the midnight hour drew near and we were getting ready to head to the main stage to see ICP, I came up with a good disguise. I put on a hoodie and I tied a bandana over my face, all bandito style, which let me move throughout the grounds with anonymity and greatly reduced my fears of a third beatdown. That day I'd sent a pic of my face to my friend Cody, who worked for ICP, and her response was, "What the fuck did you do?" Of course she thought I instigated it. She knew me well. Maybe I did. Maybe Juggalos were allergic to glitter and tight-ass Daisy Dukes on men. Or maybe they were just a couple of bad colonels in an otherwise family-filled field of corn. I prefer the latter. But I did manage to elicit enough sympathy from Cody for her to let me on stage at the end of the ICP set to take part in Fago Armageddon. If you've ever seen ICP, you know exactly what that is. If not, well, then you gotta go see for yourself. During the last song, they bring out multiple pallets full of Diet Root Beer Fago. Diet because it doesn't have sugar, so it won't leave you all sticky, and root beer because it's got the best smell. And they let 40 or 50 fans on stage to crack them open and spray them all over the crowd at the end of the show. It's sublime, and it made the whole trip, beatdown included, worth it to take part in that. It was as joyous an occasion as I've ever felt, and it happened while they played one of my favorite ICP songs, Bang, Pow, Boom. After the show, elated but soaked to the bones in Midwestern budget pop, we were freezing, so we made a beeline back to the RV. I decided to leave well enough alone and let that cap my Gathering of the Juggalos experience. The next morning, as soon as I woke up, I started driving us back to Nashville, one massive headache accentuated mile after the other. I'm not sure I'll be going back to a Gathering of the Juggalos this year, or ever again for that matter, but it's not because my love of ICP has waned. It's not because I no longer consider myself a Juggalo. I do. I am. But I'm a lot of things, and one of the things I'm most certainly not is a repetitive in my travels. There's still a lot of places I want to see and things I want to do in this world. If I'm going to rent an RV for a week and travel through the heartland, it's probably going to be a focus around a NASCAR race, try and find a demolition derby nearby, or go to Branson and see Tony Orlando perform in the Tony Orlando Theater. That's a lifelong dream. Or I'll go spend a couple of weeks in Thailand, or go to Peru and hike to Machu Picchu. Maybe see what living in Botswana without any electricity or running water is like. Or maybe try something really fun, like attempting to get my picture taken with a cannibal tribe in Papua New Guinea. If there's one thing I do not like to do on vacation, it's go to music festivals. I just don't like seeing music in the sunlight, but I still love me some ICP. I'm going to travel to Hartford to see them on their next tour. A few months after all this went down, I traveled to Detroit for Hallowicked, the annual ICP hometown Halloween concert, and I got to take part in Fago Armageddon yet again. Thanks to my main motherfucker Kevin Gill moving literal mountains of security guards to get me up there. I also tracked down the address of the lawyer who's suing the FBI on behalf of ICP because the FBI's official categorization of Juggalos is a street gang. I literally showed up unannounced at his fancy law office in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, in a denim jacket with a huge hatchet man on the back and asked the front desk lady if I could just shake his hand and say thank you. And you know what? It worked. Dude came down from his office to meet me and talk to me. People have no reason to be scared of Juggalos, but people do have reason to be scared of closed-minded assholes. They're everywhere. There's a few in every church and more than a few at every sporting event. I've seen so many more fights at Yankees games and Giants games or in a single night out in the bars than I've seen at two-hole Gathering of the Juggalos. Just because I was an unwitting participant in one of them doesn't scare me away from going and hanging out with a bunch of fucking wackos who love being around one another. I just hope that the next time someone wants to punch me in the face, they have the balls to let me know first. Then I'm certain there will be a completely different fucking outcome. As long as my friend Drew is there, because he's really, really good at fighting. Yeah, so that's what happened, in a nutshell. One of the things that struck me when I was reading all that, which I wrote before I did most of these things, I haven't gone to a NASCAR race. I did find a demolition derby. I went to see Tony Orlando, not at the Tony Orlando Theater in Branson, Missouri. I still want to go to Branson, but I did make the lifelong dream happen of going to see Tony Orlando happen. And I saw him at the St. George Theater in Staten Island, and I even got to drive the Staten Island ferry for a little bit on the way out there. Like, who does this shit happen to? Me. That's who. But you put yourself in these positions, and they end up happening. Or I said, or I'll go spend a couple of weeks in Thailand. Did that. Or go to Peru and hike to Machu Picchu. Haven't done that yet, but since I've written this, I've been to South America three times. Twice to Brazil, once to Argentina. So I'm getting closer to Machu Picchu. And I also said maybe I'll see what living in Botswana without any electricity or running water is like. Did that too. Have yet to try to get a picture taken with a cannibal tribe in Papua New Guinea. That might be one of the last pictures I get taken. But maybe next week, my last ever picture will be taken while I'm filming this podcast. Maybe I'll get eaten by a bear mid-podcast, which would be, I mean, I think that would be fucking hilarious. But be cool. You know what would be cool is if, like, while I'm doing the podcast next week, if a bear comes up to the left of me and a wolf comes up to the right, and then we just all howl together at a full moon, which was last night. Oh, fuck, last night was the full moon. Oh, things make so much more sense now. I was so fucking crazy last night. I was literally going crazy. I was like, I had a manic episode last night. Not in a crazy way, but my mind was just super active, and I was having a hard time calming it, and I was having a hard time being in the now. And I ended up calming it down. I talked to a really good friend, and I was telling them, I was just like, I don't know about this and that, and why this person didn't do that for me and that. And it's like very out of character from the way I've been acting for the past couple of years, really. And I actually woke up this morning and kind of apologized. Not really apologized. I recognized. And I wrote him back, and I was like, called actually, and was like, I just need to not apologize, but like, I just want to recognize that I was a little out of sorts last night. And, you know, as anyone who's a real, true friend who has your back, they said, that's okay. I'm here for you through good times and bad. And that's why I love my friends. And I'm so lucky to have so many great people in my life and so many great listeners. Thanks for listening to another episode. I know this one went super long. I didn't expect to talk about motorcycle riding as long as I did, but holy shit. I'm going to post a bunch of these pictures to my Instagram right now. Like I said, if you want a Suck and Blow shirt or a world-famous Yellow Pine Tavern shirt designed by the inimitable Aaron C. Lazar, one of Staten Island's finest. I don't know that he knows that I drove the Staten Island ferry once, but I did. On the way to see Tony Orlando. Like, maybe other people can fucking talk their way into the pilot house at the Staten Island ferry and get to drive the ferry for a little bit by telling them all about their experiences in the Rock Soft cruise and how one of their guys that they know works on the ferry, and then the captain will actually hand you the fucking wheel. I have a picture to prove it. Scroll back on my Instagram if you don't believe me. It was, I think, might have been November 2016, I believe is when that happened. Might have been November 2017. October or November. Scroll back if you want to see me driving the Staten Island ferry. Anyway, Aaron Lazar lives in Staten Island. I bet he hasn't seen Tony Orlando. Bet he hasn't seen him at the St. George Theater. One of the things I think I'm going to have to do when I go back to New York City one of these days is see a show at the St. George Theater with Aaron Lazar, and maybe we'll invite the rest of you people who want to come. But for now, I invite you to keep tuning into this podcast week after week, Tuesdays with Jakey. Eventually, I'll get around to some more Fridays with Friends episodes. Next week's episode might be a little late because it's my birthday Monday. Feel free to send birthday cards, cash, gifts, dirty panties to P.O. Box 4116, McCall, Idaho, 83638, or send things to the Yellow Pine Tavern, care of Jake the Bartender, 330 Yellow Pine Avenue, Yellow Pine, Idaho. I don't know the zip code, but you can find it by Googling it. And while you're on the internet, why don't you send this podcast to some of your friends? Why don't you also, in all seriousness, if you could leave a Yelp or a TripAdvisor review for the Yellow Pine Tavern and mention the handsome bartender and the amazing cheeseburgers he makes and the great music he plays inside, that'd be fucking cool. We could use more business. And maybe if people are searching for weird things to do in the backwoods of Idaho, if they see some cool reviews on TripAdvisor, they'll be like, yeah, let's go to Yellow Pine. Sounds like a good time at that tavern. Seriously, if you could write one of those reviews, I'd really appreciate it. And I want to say thank you to whoever sent me this gift after last week's podcast when I was talking about how when I fell off the building, I was despondent that the EMTs cut my Who 25th anniversary concert tour shirt off my body and how upset I was and how I kept the bloodstained shirt for a long time but eventually lost it. Someone fucking sent me one. I got it in the mail today. I guess it's a birthday present. It's one of the most thoughtful gifts I've ever received. So please let me know who you were if you sent that to me, and I'll, there's a good chance I'll want to make out with you. Very good chance, more likely chance I won't, but there's still a very good chance that I will. I didn't say an overwhelming chance, not more than 50%. 2% is a very good chance. Like, if you get told you have terminal cancer and the doctor says 2% chance you'll live, if you have the power of positive thinking, you'll be like, well, that's a very good chance. So that's about the chance that I'm going to want to make out with you for sending me the shirt. But, who knows? If you, if you look like Barbara Streisand, head put on the body of Henry Rollins, I'll most definitely want to make out with you. Yeah, that's what I fantasize usually about, when it's just me alone in my hammock up there in Yellow Pine. But thank you for sending me the shirt, really. It's fucking awesome. And, if you can't send me a shirt, send me some money. PayPal, jake@rocksoft.com, or Venmo, which is Jake-Sufnerowski, or it's attached to my phone number. Text me anytime, 917-443-7615. You can call me. I'm probably not going to answer unless you're my friend in real life. But because you're my friend on here, I'll talk to you every Tuesday with Tuesdays with Jakey. Thanks a lot for tuning in this week and sticking with me throughout this whole thing. And there's probably some other things I wanted to talk about, but I'll get to them next week. I had a bunch of notes. And for now, good night, God bless, and inshallah.